Hey,
So,
good to see you on the screen, and I look forward to sharing a few thoughts from up north here and how rugby's doing in these parts.
yeah, fantastic, Gareth, and it's nice to have you on the show today, all the way from beautiful Canada. Why don't you tell us, as far as the audience goes, whereabouts you are actually located?
I'm as far west as you can get in Canada on Vancouver Island. So just 20 minutes north of here is our National Training Center at Langford, city of Langford, where our sevens teams and our 15s teams and our Pride development program prepare. And I say I'm on the west coast, so with no snow here, we may get snow in the winter, but the rest of our friends are playing hockey and skating on ponds across the rest of the country.
It's a beautiful part of the world, and I've been very fortunate enough and blessed to be able to spend some time up around your region. And if I had a bit more money, I'd probably try and live there.
Yeah, well, I did my time in Europe for chasing the rugby ball and chasing my pro contracts, but very happy to be back here on the West Coast. We've got Vancouver Sevens, just again, a couple hours away that I'm a big part of, and there's a huge passion. So to see the world come to us every year for that is really important.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, we're going to talk a lot about rugby in Canada, and we're going to talk about a lot about rugby today in general. And I just want to go on, say before we go on any further, thank you very much for the dress appropriate etiquette today. I love the shirt.
That wasn't in your honor. It's a company that I've been involved with for a long time. Just got back from a couple of months in France. But I was at Eden Park, the very first final in '87 as an 18-year-old, having just finished the first Rugby World Cup playing for Canada, and then up with the great Tremaine family. Actually,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Simon and I got to know each other, so I was a guest of Kel at the final in '87, and great memories. And all the Frenchmen that played in that final didn't get the result they wanted, but then went on to build Eden Park, the clothing company in France.
And did you see a lot of similarities from a scenery perspective between Canada and New Zealand?
Oh, definitely scenery, culture. Obviously, I think hockey takes the place of where rugby maybe with you guys, but that's something we're working on and trying to change that. But yeah, a lot of values that are very similar, and yeah, the way we live our lives.
You guys drink more beer than us, don't we?
Maybe, yeah.
So
We got a lot of guys
about
who tried to prove and win that battle over the years.
yeah. Well, we won't go down without a fight, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So tell us about your playing days. Where did all that start?
All started in Canada. Learned all my rugby here. I have a Welsh name and ended up playing a lot of rugby in Europe. So people tend to think I learned my rugby over there, but I'm very proud to say that I learned all my rugby in Canada. Went
Yep.
to school here, St. Michael's University School.
Yep.
Really good program here. My father and a bunch of his expat mates were my coaches coming through, and I had a great experience. And then went over to UK as a young guy, did my undergrad in Canada, and then went back over to France and England and Wales to play my pro rugby.
Brilliant. So what was the inspiration to get into rugby? Did your family play? Did your dad play?
Yeah, Dad was dual sport, rugby and soccer.
Uh-huh.
He signed with Chelsea way back in the day, but never quite made it all the way. I played with London Welsh in the heydays of Welsh rugby, and then came out here as a school teacher. Both my parents were in sport and were school teachers. They came out here just looking for a new life in North America and Canada, and found it on the West Coast. And so they immediately, all my family, people that I call my family, none of them are blood relatives out here. We're all members from the field hockey club for mom or the rugby club and soccer club for dad. So that was just my community. The Castaways, as it was then, was this great club. Now become the Castaway Wanderers, where my 11-year-old plays his rugby. And it's been a full circle ride. But no, that was our community here. And I played a lot of soccer and basketball and track and field. And then rugby was the one that kind of emerged at sort of 15, 16. And I decided to specialize. And that was my chosen game.
Oh, brilliant. I see Oxford University on your CV. Did you play over there as well?
I did, yeah. I did my postgrad over there. Fantastic experience to one to be at the university and just to be around all those great minds and all those great discussions. But a rugby club too, with a proud history, and to play at Twickenham and as part of that rivalry with the light blue people that we don't talk about. But no, really great for me. I had two World Cups under my belt before I went there.
Right.
But in rugby terms, obviously learned different things. But as a person off the field, so many great experiences that I would never trade. And it was just before professionalism hit Europe, and I'm pretty grateful to rugby helping me get my foot in the door there.
Yeah.
I mean, I could crack a book. I didn't always read all of it, but so I played my part. I know that rugby helped me get in the doors of what's an incredible institution.
So one of the things I'm always interested to know about someone that's played their rugby in different continents is what main differences did you see in rugby when you went to the UK versus back in Canada?
Well, it's funny, probably less between UK and Canada because I think we took a lot of our models from expats who are coming to Canada, but spend a lot of time in France. We're very different culture, but the passion is probably greater. Said my father's Welsh, and I got to see some Welsh village rugby and what that meant to those villages. In France, it's identical, especially in the southwest. Quite amazing. And obviously, spent a lot of time in New Zealand. Our teams traveled a lot and competed a lot in New Zealand. So we had coaches from there, and we played a lot of provincial rugby down there. So I learned a lot of lessons, often not very flattering score lines, but we definitely put those lessons in the bank, especially as a national team, and drew on that. So got to see all those different cultures, and I think one of the benefits for me as a player is I could take from different coaches, different tours, different teams that could come into Canada back then, and sort of pick the best of the best. Where that's a big challenge for us now. I find we're very much more isolated. Our players are isolated in the rugby world because of professionalism and just because teams don't tour as much, and because of how expensive it is to leave these shores and go and have those experiences. And there's nothing like playing a tough game, maybe not getting it all right, talking to your opposite number, learning some lessons, and then putting that in the bank so you can go out and play again. And that's a big part of the model that's been tough to achieve in Canada in the last decade or so.
Right, understand. So you're working for Rugby Canada at the moment. What's your current role with the Rugby Canada?
I am now Director of Strategic Initiatives, and including that is I took over all the commercial during COVID. So I've worked on that side of the game. I worked on as a manager and with the programs when we set up. But then I've sort of morphed into the commercial side of things and some relationships along the way. And then and now into much more strategic stuff, some government relations. Say I'm a co-founder of the Vancouver Sevens, which is part of the HSBC World Series,
Right.
which is hugely valuable to us as just to grow the game, but also to generate funds that we spend in supporting the game. And working with our new CEO, Nathan Bombrys, who's brought a vision and a strategic plan that's just been released on where Rugby Canada thinks it needs to go, the things it needs to work on. And I'm pretty passionate about that. Again, disappointed not to see men's 15 at the Rugby World Cup. First time ever for us. So that was an eye-opener that started about 2-3 years ago because we knew we weren't going. On the women's side, I've been passionate and worked on that for many years. And just to see what our women are doing, a couple of big stops down in New Zealand, part of WXV and the World Cup. A team that we really believe in and we're investing in, both in rugby terms but also commercially. We feel it's a huge growth area for us, and we want these women to be household names, and we want them to have a shot at winning the World Cup in 25.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, you've just gone through a whole lot of rhetoric there that I've got different topics I want to ask you questions about, so we'll get to those. But I want to go back a century or so before that, because rugby, as far as my reading tells me, the first historic game was in 1865 in Canada, in Montreal. And have I got that one right?
I believe so. Yeah, some of the early games. I'm not sure if Harvard and McGill weren't involved, and so those early games of that football crossover, football before the helmets, as we know them in pads, but also then the British influence coming into North America. That is the history of our country. So a lot of clubs around. You'll find the Toronto Welsh. You'll find Irish clubs. You'll find those kind of clubs around, and a lot of those people started to build the clubs, and then different new Canadians came in, and it's now we're pretty much a melting pot, as most rugby clubs are, but we've got people from all over the world, and we're pretty proud of it, and we're trying to even enhance that a bit more to new Canadians coming into the country, give them our game as one that they could choose.
Yeah, great. Now, the governing body wasn't formed until 1975, so over 100 years before Canada got its act together when it comes to rugby. But what were some of the significant first advances, though, by having a governing body looking after the sport?
I think, like a lot of organizations like ours, we were provincially run. We have 10 provinces in Canada. So those are the political structures that then were running the game and administering the game. And then I guess they came together. I'm not that old. I wasn't quite around when those meetings were happening. But I guess they came together to form a national association, because virtually there were no national team games. There was a handful. There was one very early one to Japan, and then one in '62 to the UK, but not much in between. And then when I started playing, actually, there was only one regular test match a year. That was against the USA. And so that's where we've come from in a pretty short period of time. So that's why the national body got going. And thank goodness, because we have so many challenges of administration and safety and all the things that are required in modern sport, delivering it to North American families. It's not an option anymore not to be organized, and that's one of the priorities we've got as Rugby Canada, is to make sure we're a really well organized and well run federation that serves the families and the participants.
Yeah, brilliant. So when you go to other countries, in particular, you said you've spent time in New Zealand and in the UK and France. Structurally, from a rugby administration point of view, what are the main differences between the structural setup of rugby in different countries?
I suppose we have a system that would be recognizable, excuse me, to Kiwis or to Englishmen. Um, where the schools are still important, the clubs are important, and that's evolved obviously over the last 20 years, as all those countries have found the need for academies and the need to serve the professional game, the growth of the women's game, and how kids are different and how non-contact options are important. So probably has some reflects those organizations. Obviously, in a large part of our country, weather is an issue. We have two different seasons in Canada, something that a lot of people may not know. So where I live in British Columbia, we play a more of a traditional British season, which would be September to May, whereas the rest of the country plays a different season. So already you've got a challenge in having a squad session or having a national championship. What weekend you play it on, when one team hasn't been playing for 4 months, they've been in the snow, and the other team has come off a full season. Those are a lot of the discussions we've had, and we probably will continue to have, because the weather ain't going to change. And also the distances are massive. So where you might have a squad session in a place like Auckland or London, that's not an option. We also have Quebec in Canada, which has some French influence, especially on the women's side of the game. Real leaders there. So we have lots of challenges to even just putting a squad session together and ultimately putting a team on the field. So some of the same challenges, maybe a bit broader because of the geography and because of the weather constrictions as well.
Do you know of another country in the world that faces that climatical challenge as Canada does?
I don't know of anyone else that has two different seasons within their country.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's tough, and obviously you're competing for those athletes that you want. You want them doing training in what would be a dome in Canada, right? So in the snow, you can still do some skill training. Yep. You can't have full games so much, but those players are playing hockey, which is obviously a much more such easier sport to choose. You can go play on the pond. You can go play anywhere on a river that's frozen. So those are some of our challenges. But we have big, determined athletes. I mean, we're not in a great form right now, especially in the men's 15 side of things. But I don't doubt the commitment of these players. They are passionate, and that is something you'll see in Canadian teams. You saw it in our women's team, fiercely passionate and physical, and not afraid of the battle. And so that's a pretty good starting point when you're trying to rebuild the program.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later as well. But let's get on to the strategic plan. It's called One Squad, which I think is a nice mantra for that strategy plan. And a couple of things I just want to share with you and the readers. And if we have a look, first of all, at the ambition of Rugby Canada is recognised and respected worldwide as a top 12 rugby nation on and off the field of play. I guess the big question is, how are you going to do that? You know, you're ranked 21 in the world today, as far as I know, and in the men's 15s, and fourth in the women's, which is a fantastic achievement, of course. So how are you going to achieve that ambition?
Yeah, it's a really interesting approach we've taken, and I'd be interested to know what your listeners think of this. Top 12, and that's the entirety of what we do as a rugby organization. Obviously, for our men to get top 12 in the world, it's a huge step up. It's not going to happen in a year or 2 or 3 years, right? That's a project. The women are already there. We have to maintain that, and we have to push them to go and win and lift some hardware. The sevens programs as well. This is the other thing that we're quite unique in, that we have competitive sevens and 15s programs. A lot of nations of our size with our resources have chosen one path or the other. We're doing both, which is maybe something to talk about afterwards. It's we've learned a lot over the last 7 or 8 years. No, I think it's a really interesting metric to say top 12, and that's included in governing the game, number of participants, amount of revenue coming in, the ability to host events. We're looking at all those measurables, making sure we're safe and insured, and we're teaching safe rugby, and we're having introductory for kids. We're having new people coming to try the game, non-contact versions. All that, we believe, is part of being a top rugby nation. Also, broadcast is a big piece of that. So people can go and enjoy the game, whether it's on their phone or on their television. That's an important piece. It's been a struggle in all of North America. So we're working very hard on that. That's a big project of mine. So yeah, when we say top 12, we don't mean that the men are going to, get right back up there with a couple of quick, good seasons. This is about a bigger project. I know it's raised some concern from some of our alum and some of our membership because they're not sure that it's clear. But I think, excuse me, if you can put some context around it, that a lot of the resources and the energy we have to spend is on administering the game. As I've said earlier, is getting people to squad sessions, just getting people safely to and from places. When that's part of what we have to do, it's okay to recognize that as that's part of the job of the union. Excuse me. So it's interesting. World Rugby doesn't have any metrics on it yet, but it's something we're tracking, and we're going to challenge ourselves. And I think it's a really good way of looking at what our job is as an organization. And so we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. And as you said, the women are looking to be best in the world. That's where their next step is.
Yeah, brilliant. Look, what I like about that ambition really is the fact that it's talking about off the field as well, and you've articulated that really well, because I think it's we talk about the global rugby family, don't we? And that drills down to local and national level as well. And there's so many different components and stakeholders involved in the great game. And it's not just about getting those players to run out there and win trophies, because they are dependent on everything else that's happening off the field. So I think it's a real plus to you guys and girls that you've actually put that in there as an ambition, is to get that off the field stuff right as well as on the field.
Yeah, it's sort of a non-negotiable for us because of the culture we live in, right? People don't want to send their kids to a sport that may or may not be safe. It has to be safe. That's a starting point, and it also has to be inclusive. Unfortunately, that's in North America, that's a big buzzword, diversity and inclusion. But I'm quite proud of our sport in Canada that it's always been that. Obviously, there's work to be done. We can get new people with different backgrounds involved in the game, but in general, rugby clubs have open doors to people who want to come and play the sport. Now, we have to speak to them better. We have to try and get different communities engaging in our sport. But I think we've been diverse and inclusive as a value, but we just need to get better at it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an interesting times. It's not an easy road to walk, but we're going to go after it and see what we can do. I think the one squad thing, I know there's lots of monikers come out of this process of doing a strategic plan, and there's catchwords, but I always spoke about squad, especially in World Cup campaigns, which was the pinnacle for me when I played. You can't win a World Cup, as we've just seen in France, with only 15 guys or girls, or 21 for that matter, 23 these days. You just doesn't happen that way. So I think squad is a really good term, and I think you need everyone pulling. And we've had some issues politically, and we're pretty open about that some people have maybe not been pulling in the right direction, and people have thought about different things that should be done. One thing about this plan is it's clear what the national organization is going to do. It's clear what they're going to work with the provincial organizations to deliver and how they're going to support them. But there's no lack of clarity in it. You may not agree with everything in it, which is going to happen in a strategic plan. Just give you one example. Like, a lot of people who are fans talk about sponsorship and how we should have more sponsorship, or our women should have better sponsors, or we should have better integrated partners. I agree. But you don't do that, as you know, because you work in this game a little bit, but you don't do that without a good presence, good storytelling, good broadcast, safe and efficient sport being administered to new families and those people who are consuming sponsors' products. So this is all the work that allows you to expand your financial capacity, which is one of the goals. So we can get new partners on board once we have good events, once our teams are performing well, being competitive. Then we believe that the partnership will follow, and we can serve them very well.
I like what you're hearing, because I see so much around the world in rugby at the moment that when a new sponsor comes along, for example, someone rushes out and says, let's grab them, they must be good for our business. But as you know, that's not always the case. So doing due diligence like you're talking about, I think, is vital from a business model point of view, but also from that safety environment that you're talking about as well. So that sounds really good. Who's involved in bringing that strategic plan together? Who actually has input to it?
Well, there was a huge group of stakeholders, to be honest. There was a board committee, obviously, under Nathan Bombas's leadership, some board expertise, but we also had past and present players involved. We had the provincial unions involved. We had some outside people from other Canadian sport. So quite a diverse group. Which was important, because we have done strat plans in the past that haven't been quite as exhaustive in terms of the stakeholders that have had input. So I'm not saying it's perfect, but it is definitely clear. It's been published, which is as much of an achievement as anything, properly last week for us. And it's out there. So if anyone has any doubts, I was on some calls this week, and if anyone has any doubts about why we're doing something, it's there written down in black and white. And so Nathan and all of our team at Rugby Canada, as well as the board, there's very little doubt about the things we're going to work on and what we're going to invest in.
Did players have buy-in to it?
I hope so. It's interesting. I mean, there were past players and alum involved at the table, particularly in the smaller group, which was really interesting, men's and women's. I think so, because obviously they want to see their high performance environments as good as they can be. The reality, though, is that there's only so much resource, so we have to spend that in an efficient way. It's not often going to be optimum for the athletes. What might happen in a richer nation, so we have to make sure we're spending it wisely and with the best advantage for those players and creating opportunities. Big debate here is the age grade programs, right? We all want to see age grade national teams, but to bring together an age grade national team or to compete internationally is ridiculously expensive. Because to assemble a team in Canada, a 30-person squad, we're looking at $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 before you've even, done anything. So these are massive numbers. So there may be better ways of doing it, and that's kind of what we're going to look into. Is it better to have squad sessions with regional East and West, and then come together, and when that moment comes, and it may be only at under 20 level, that's when you pick your national team that actually competes. But investing in 30-odd athletes only to go overseas or to go to one game may not be the best use of money. Those are some of the discussions that are happening, and I think the athletes, when they know that they're in the room for one, and that discussions are happening with the right people, they may not like all the outcomes again, and maybe not everything they would want to do is getting funded, but at least they know the money's being spent in the right place and not being wasted.
Yeah, good. Second part I wanted to pull out of the strategic plan was this one. The purpose: to inspire the nation on the global stage and to lead, govern and support the game of rugby across Canada. How are you going to do that one?
Well, obviously we're we're a national organization, and we want to compete. We want to compete at the highest levels. But going back to what we were just talking about earlier, that if we don't have our house in order in terms of our governance, in terms of the safety of the sport, in terms of the financial stability of the sport, there's no point in having a team that may win a game or two at some point. There's got to be something underpinning it. So when new people do come to the game, when new broadcasters do start showing our game, we actually have a system that we can invest in. So that's partly where that comes from. Obviously, globally, we probably overachieve in terms of hosting events and being a safe pair of hands for organizations like World Rugby to host and deliver events in North America. We just had a very successful Pacific Four in Ottawa this summer. We set records for Canadian rugby, the women, with New Zealand and Australia and USA in town. We put 10,000 people in a previously was only a CFL stadium, Canadian football, that's gridiron. So we're making moves like that, investing in our women. But alongside that, there's a program to have thousands of school kids come to the game. We left 3,000 rugby balls behind in that community. We did a huge media blitz and education blitz on what rugby is and how you can join it and why it's a great game. So that's part of what gets achieved when we go and take our national team. So I think we've done well in international events. Obviously, the Vancouver Sevens, as part of the World Series, is a huge celebration of the game. If you'd have told me that we were going to put 75,000 people in a stadium to watch rugby over a weekend in Vancouver, again, a stadium that normally hosts football or MLS soccer, I'd have thought you were crazy. But we worked really, really hard, and there's some specific challenges. And it's been a huge success in terms of a focal point for every corner of our community to celebrate the game, and new families, new people to come and enjoy the game. Sometimes they're in a costume and they're barely understanding sevens, but they're having a great time, and rugby's the vehicle that's brought them there. And that's part of that's part of the battle we got to fight.
So going back to 2014, when the women got into the final of the Rugby World Cup, what direct impact did that have on grassroots in terms of girls wanting to play rugby in Canada?
Yeah, not perhaps as much as we would have liked. I think if that happened to us tomorrow, we would be in a much better position to grow that. But that was partly on the back of some really good decisions that have been made in our history The women's game has always been well respected. Hasn't always been funded to a level that the programs would have liked, but it's been there. There's also been a bit of an anomaly in Canada where, for university sport, that's youth sport, there is scholarship and there is funding for and a national championship for women's programs. Whereas the men's side of things, it's not formalized. So there has always been a really strong pathway for women to stay in the game, to keep studying, and to invest in themselves at university and be a part of really strong programs. So that was there before 2014, and then it's carried us right through to the bronze medal in 2016 in Rio at the the Olympics, and also a team that is now top 4 in the world. So that's a big piece of what differentiates us on the women's side. But we've also had a great group of athletes, and that was a pretty exceptional team in 2014, and maybe a bit of a surprise to us that we weren't able to. It was on national TV, which is a deal I was involved in, which was great, because that very almost wasn't on national TV. But we did have some incredible scenes of young girls and boys sitting in pubs or rugby clubs right across the country, watching that and identifying. And that was a huge pathway moment for us.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we want that to happen again for 25, and we want to do a bigger job of blowing it up and making these athletes household names, and letting not only our community see them and celebrate them, but also partners and broadcasters and everyone else who is crucial to this journey.
Brilliant. That's really good, really good. Now, looking at some of the other things that are going on in terms of grassroots, how do you attract young kids away from those other well-known sports in Canada? What's the magic sauce there?
Yeah, there's lots of great athletes in Canada. Lots of athletes that, in sports like hockey and football, they don't tend to go on as long as rugby does. So you don't tend to have a sport for life. So some of our greatest athletes of the last generation have been crossover athletes from football or hockey or volleyball or other sports. So that's something we're continuing to do. But we need to be organized. We need to have a good offering. The relationship with professional rugby, which is something that obviously young kids and families want to see, is sort of ever evolving, and we've obviously had a tough few weeks here with the Toronto Arrows declaring they're not going to be playing next year in the MLR. So that's always part of it for families that are maybe choosing between a sport as to where can I end up in this sport. So can I get a university scholarship? Can I have a life in the game just enjoying sport? Can I have a professional contract down the road? And a couple of those questions we have really strong answers to. The professional game is one that's a challenge. We're currently having discussions with all the major professional leagues in the world. Nathan Brombries has good relationships there, and we're having discussions that are strategic in nature so that we can find places for our players to play, and maybe partner with leagues around the country in terms of broadcasts and getting them into this market and a lot of the other issues on the table. But that is a piece that's tough. MLR has been huge in terms of on the men's side, having a place for our players to play. So if they choose rugby, either after high school or after university, they can stay. There's a wage. It's not a huge get-rich wage like basketball or hockey might be. But for the moment, it was a place for them to play. There's 66 Canadians playing in Major League Rugby. So hugely important. A chunk of those, 20-odd, were at the Arrows, and that's a tough loss for our country. But there are perhaps... and we have a lot of empathy for those players and the coaches and the fans, right? It was really a great project that Bill Webb put together, and just some realities just came forward there that couldn't continue. But that dialogue may have created some other opportunities that we're looking at, and it's an important piece. I was able to go to Europe and play. Some of the laws were a little bit different in terms of those host nations, in terms of France and England, and in terms of how you could get into those teams. So that's been a challenge for our players. The women have a huge presence in the French leagues and the English league right now. I'm hoping that doesn't dry up. I'm hoping that what happened to me and some of my colleagues, not me so much, but late 90s, when the English and French leagues in particular started to look after their own and make it harder for North Americans to get jobs in those leagues. We're hoping that doesn't happen on the women's front, but that's always a fear. And so we need to create opportunities where we can play in Canada at the highest level, play against ourselves, and still stay in touch with the international game. But it's a difficult task.
Toronto Arrows, I just want to touch on that for a second, because as an outsider, hearing that news the other week was pretty sad, because from my perspective, Canada has really been helping prop up that MLR for quite a while. And it's important, I think, for Canada to have teams in that league. So, does it bring up a problem in terms of how these clubs are being invested and financed? Because we see that one person's potential passing can be a really big drain on this. So, has it highlighted an opportunity, as you say, to look at how these clubs should be financed?
Yeah, well, first of all, Bill Webb is an incredible individual who really grew his passion for the game, and put his money where his mouth was, and was an incredible individual, not only in leading and some governance issues and his pretty strong business background, but also really adopted the values of the game. I remember taking his young boys, who are now both at university here, and both great players, challenging for national team spots in age grades. But into the dressing room at BMO Field in Toronto, having just lost a nail biter, and those young lads got to see the current Canadian players at that time banged up and bruised after a test match. And I think for me, Bill Webb saw something in the commitment of those players, and he saw the values that they were living by, and they all got up to speak to these young boys, these young Toronto boys, and say, "Hey, good luck, and maybe one day you'll wear the red jersey," which was the basic message. So I think that stuck with Bill. Anyways, that's first thing. It's an incredible loss for us, and it's incredibly sad for everyone who supported the Arrows. In some ways, the question isn't ours to answer. Professional rugby is important, and we need to have a relationship with them, but it's not for us to get involved as a national organization, and it's not for us to prop up an organization, not for us to tell someone how to run the organization. We need certain things out of those. We want really good strength and conditioning. We want good professional environments. Those are obviously key. We want all our players, men and women, playing in those kind of environments. But professional rugby, and again, I've been involved in it most of my adult life. Nathan Bromwich knows it inside out. He's run professional clubs. So I just think that's something that will happen in North America. I don't have a glass ball. I'm not going to tell you what it's going to look like or how it's going to get there. It has to happen. But as Rugby Canada, we have to be ready for whatever the outcomes are, and it's a shame what's happened in Toronto. We can't control that as a national body. We have to look after the whole game.
Yeah.
But our thoughts are with Toronto, because there's some great passionate fans there.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking around funding more, where does Rugby Canada's money come from? Do you get government support as well from an investment point of view?
We get some government support. We get some World Rugby funding. A lot of our revenues are around events. So up until the recent resulting conversations from Rugby World Cup in France, we didn't have a fixture calendar. And so when you think you have a business that basically makes its money off holding international events and doing it properly, and then can build on that, we didn't have any fixtures. Now we have a fixture calendar on the men's front. The women's front, we had a bit more certainty, and we have Vancouver Sevens, which is still being negotiated as to what that'll look like for the next cycle. So a lot of unknowns on that piece of the revenue, which is part of it. Obviously, we have to do certain things, registration and delivering the game, and Sport Canada has changed some of its ways of operating. So we're always having to move and invest resources in trying to get that money. But when it's running well, we can be an entity that has sponsorship and donations to help us achieve things like the women getting to a 2025 World Cup final and winning. That's a campaign we're just putting together now and putting in front of people right now. And whether it's donors or sponsors, that's going to be a big part of it. Because we don't, you look at the UK and some of the other leagues, that there's not a lot of leagues that are really making a lot of money. So we're going to be balanced in how we approach that.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, we were pretty confident we can do that. But the regular international fixtures was a huge part of it. And now that we have some line of sight on that, I think we'll be able to deliver better and create some revenue there.
Yeah, okay, great. Now, in terms of participation in the sport, in terms of, hopefully you're going to tell me there's been good growth in the sport, but where does rugby rank in Canada against other sports in terms of participation numbers?
Yeah, it depends who you ask. We're sort of talking 35,000 participants, can go up to 50 depending on seasonal, and then that's not including high schools and universities. So that's a number that we want to capture and we want to talk to and have as part of the family. So that's one of the projects that's going on. So it's a solid number, about 50,000 in a database that we can communicate to at any time. So those are solid numbers, but they're not ice hockey or soccer numbers for Canada. So we got to continue to grow the game, but grow it in a way that's providing people with quality experience too.
Yeah.
Whether that's playing the game or watching the game, that they're both equally valuable in terms of creating a rugby fan.
Yeah, okay. Now, across the world today, we have a lot of emphasis, of course, in rugby on mental health, and it's been an increasingly discussed topic, also along the lines of abuse and racism and all these ugly things that we're starting to see. What precautions does Rugby Canada put in place to make sure their players, their officials, and their coaches are looked after when it comes to their mental health?
Yeah, well, we have, first of all, as an employee at Rugby Canada, I have full mental health support, and we have a really strong program there. So that's great. And that's part of being a leading organization. We can get good people who will have support if they need it. Our athletes, too, have a very robust system under them. We learned a lot, and we had some issues over time with some of our athletes. And we've come out the other side, to be honest. And a lot of sports are just discovering some of their issues or dealing with them right now. We have a program called Safe Sport, which we have to follow, and we do follow. And it involves everything from coaches training and how you manage crisis situations as well as day-to-day practices. So it's a pretty hot topic in Canada, and we are fully compliant and we are fully invested in it, partly, again, because of our own little history. And we're not perfect by any means, but it's definitely on the front foot. And yeah, some of the mental health issues we saw coming out of the World Cup, particularly the Men's World Cup, and I know there's some issues on the women's side as well. It's disturbing, right? You want this to be the pinnacle of these people's lives, and win or lose, it's still a great experience they can use for the rest of their lives. And yeah, I think maybe we're getting a few things wrong at the top level when the case is that people get to the very top or close to the very top, don't quite succeed, and then need a break. That's not the rugby that I knew. I think it's great they're doing it, but I think as a game, we need to look at how we're talking about the game, how the role of some public opinion and how damaging it can be, and what we're encouraging. And it's a complicated decision, but I think as rugby people, we're mature enough. We can have that conversation open and honest. But obviously, the players and the participants get support when they do have issues. So yeah, it's probably our next big hurdle for rugby.
As with most things in life, I think around that conversation, we've seen the evolution of humanity, haven't we, in the last 20 years or so? And when you and I played, there wasn't the social media presence there is today. And that in itself brings a whole new world of pressure and observation from a different group of people that weren't ever involved in the game. So
and I think I dare say that maybe you and I have 11 and 13-year-old boys. I dare say that you and I can be thick-skinned because we didn't grow up needing that kind of approval, but unfortunately that's part of what young people have in their lives, is that approval, and pro athletes definitely have it. That's part of what their persona is. It's not just about what goes on a court or a field or wherever they are. It's a reality of modern athletes. So we have to monitor that as well, because like it or not, it doesn't matter what you and I think at our ages, it is part of their lives and it's going to affect them. So it's a big conversation, and I think it's probably a conversation for every kid in North America. As to what the role of other people talking about them or about things is going to play in their lives.
How are you finding it? Are you responsible in your role for bringing on sponsors?
I have just recently come off that. I'm still supportive of that. Yeah, we were very proud that we maintained all our sponsors through COVID. I think that was through the relationships and through our athletes and the engagement we had with them. But there's a lot of shifts post-COVID of how companies are spending, the things they're looking at. I'm really proud of a couple of recent ones. We have a company called NFP that's an insurance partner, and they're fantastic, and they're the front of jersey sponsor for our women. But not only do we get them to support the women, and obviously those funds will help support some programming, but we put on programming, something we recognized in our research, that there was a drop-off of young women leaving the game once contact was introduced. So our development team introduced a program, which is a non-contact program for 13 to 16-year-old girls. And it's been a huge success. So NFP came as a partner to that and kind of helped us launch it. So those are the partnerships that are becoming really valuable, where not only at the top end of the game are they involved and supportive, and they really are supportive, and they really have understood the pathway of Sophie DeGoody, our women's 15s captain, and all the 7s and 15s women. It's been awesome. But also realizing that we want young girls picking up a ball and feeling comfortable trying to start playing this oval ball game.
Is there more companies becoming aware of rugby in Canada? More Canadian
That's what we're
companies?
trying.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think so. I think there's a couple of big steps over the history. One, obviously, broadcast is important. The Olympic movement was important once rugby was in the Olympic family. And I think I credit World Rugby on this. It did just bring a whole different group set of eyes on our game, even though it was sevens, and the purists on listening to this will know 7s and 15s are very different games. But in a market like ours where we still had a project of legitimizing rugby as a game, a lot of people just saw it as this crazy sport where they weren't wearing pads or they're drinking beer down at the rugby club. That was still a challenge for us. So the Olympic movement, obviously we had success in Rio at the first Olympics with our women winning bronze, so that was huge. So that dream to be put in front of young families is valuable. The concept of the Olympics, every Canadian understands that, and now they know that rugby is part of that. So that's legitimized us just by its very existence, and it is a pathway for kids who just want to go to the Olympics. So
Yep.
rugby is one of the sports they can choose.
Yep.
So that's been huge, but we have a lot of work to do. I mean, something like quarterfinals weekend at Paris and this last World Cup, it was just quite remarkable, both anecdotally plus the TV numbers I saw from NBC and our own broadcaster TSM. It was just special sport. Didn't matter if you knew rugby or not. The
Exactly.
outcomes and the scenes on the fields, and I think people forget in North America things like the ref mic, where you have this diminutive, often white referee telling a massive dude to behave, and they say sorry sir, yes sir. Those things really resonate. Equally, when you have these scenes post game where the opposition have just been smashing each other, they're trading a jersey, they're sharing a moment. One of the guys may be grabbing his 3-year-old daughter and walking around the field. I was at the Tonga South Africa game with some friends who hadn't seen a lot of rugby, and they were blown away
Yep.
by a game in Marseille when particularly the Tongans were grabbing their families, but the connection between the two teams really hard fought. Good rugby, and then just them just celebrating, walking around the stadium in Marseille was just amazing. And we forget that we're close to that. We expect that from rugby, but those that aren't close to it see that and see that as a really unique offering. It's actually a competitive advantage. It's that personal side of the game. So something we can grow here and tell those stories.
Yeah, brilliant. It's summed up by saying it's a rugby family, and it's a demonstration of it in action
Yeah.
there, isn't it? Now, you've touched on the World Cup, and I can't let you go today without talking about it, because I think from a perspective of Rugby Canada, extremely unfortunate you weren't there, but you did know a couple of years out, so it gave you a little bit of a time to get the heart in order, right? But looking at Fiji, Portugal, Georgia, these teams, turning up and playing the way they did, what were your thoughts around those particular nations?
I was really happy to see Fiji, all those teams. I've been in that situation. I particularly saw the Chileans and the Uruguayans, and I felt a little bit of a connection. I was around, did a couple of their games as a commentator, and saw their fans, and it reminded me a little bit of the early days of Canadian fans traveling and just so passionate. Um, it just proves that when you invest in something like the Fiji side, I mean, that's a massive, massive 7-8 year investment from World Rugby. It's paid off. So that is sort of our appeal, that let's invest in North American rugby. Probably a bit of not a blessing, because we didn't wish them ill. They're our cousins from south of the border, United States. But when they didn't make it as well, it was a bit of a reality check on, one, the impact of COVID. And Gary Gold and Kingsley Jones, the Canadian American head coaches, have been dealt a very bad hand to try and qualify. And when the likes of Chile and Uruguay kept playing pretty much straight through as a national team. So that was one thing, obviously, it shone a light on, but it also shone a light on that the investment in the North American game wasn't where it needed to be. The structures weren't there. The access to the top game wasn't there. Access to regular fixtures for the national teams wasn't there. So that started a really good conversation, as you said, starting over 2 years ago. And so we have been into World Rugby very much with that story, saying we need fixtures. And we got that outcome at the end of the World Cup with the Pacific Nations Cup and a few other competitions that will make sense on the men's side. So hugely important. I think the fact that the U.S. weren't there as well shone a brighter light on it. And, with the World Cup coming to North America, 31 and 33, we need more investment. We need a better plan. So that's all we ask for, is give us the plan, allow us to go out and resource it as much as we can, get our public behind it, get our broadcast behind it, and then we have a much better chance of succeeding. So, I was sad, as were a lot of my old teammates and a lot of the fans, that we weren't at the big dance, but you got to earn the right. So let's set our athletes up for better success, and that's part of what this new strategic plan is about: setting them up for success, getting them lots of rugby, and on the men's side, getting out there and having a chance to win and qualify for the next World Cup.
I can tell you spent some time in New Zealand by saying you've earned the right. It's our number one code line down there.
Yeah, well, I mean, then if you can earn it in that country, you're pretty good when you put the black jersey on, right? And
Yeah,
that's been one of our challenges, and it was a big part of when I played, that you had to come through to get out of a provincial, to get onto the British Columbia provincial team. For me, was a huge achievement. And so when you got to the national team and you're playing against the All Blacks or England, it wasn't any tougher than the trial match you had to get into that team. So that was, that's something we want to get back.
Now, the reason I wanted to interview people like you from around the world of rugby was to set the state of rugby in a fair light, because during the Rugby World Cup I had thousands of comments on my shows about World Rugby and how they're destroying the game and they're not doing the right things from an investment point of view. So you're somebody that's working in a nation, a federation for a rugby country. You talked about so far on the show about how World Rugby has invested. They are giving you opportunities to create events. The relationship with World Rugby and how it's impacting Canada Rugby at the moment, positive for you?
It's getting better. Just take the sevens. We were awarded the sevens. I think we've had 10 stops in Canada now. It transformed our revenues side of the organization, that we could invest in the women's game, in the youth game, in grassroots. That's what we did with all the money. When our women went to the World Cup in New Zealand and got to the semifinal, that was investment from Canada Sevens as an event that was largely paying for that. Whereas previously it had been a pay-to-play model where the athletes were paying to go to their own World Cups. So these are the kind of connections sometimes World Rugby and the community doesn't understand. Mm-hmm. If we can put 75,000 people in Vancouver watching sevens and drinking beer, that's going to pay for us to send Sophie Degodi and her team down to World Cup with a way better chance of competing. So there's a lot of these, it's a little bit of education, but loud and clear, no fixtures, no regular fixtures means we can't run a business, we can't have domestic events, we can't prepare our teams, we can't have cycles and pinnacle training moments. So that's one thing that is being heard now, and I feel that. But it is time where this North American market needs to be invested in. And it's not going to be in the short term for the benefit of the top 8 nations in the world, I'll say, right? It's not going to be financially rewarding for the England and New Zealand in the short term. It will be in the long term, and this is how we properly grow the game. We saw it in soccer to a certain extent when the World Cup went there, and what it did not only to enhance the professional league that was existing, fledgling professional league, it grew it, and now soccer is one of the biggest markets. Something that Dan Lyle, my old foe, and I talked about is the dividend nature for things like TV contracts. So because soccer got big in North America, when they first went in there, the rights were really cheap for the Bundesliga or the Premier League in England. The rights were really cheap. But now, this sort of generation later, the highest dividend those leagues get is through the North American market. Mm-hmm. So because they invested 20 years ago, because they grew the game, because they got people to love and enjoy the sport of soccer in that case, they now have the most profitable market in the rights discussion. So that to me is really interesting. So if we can do the same thing with rugby, get it established, get a league going ultimately, but have a World Cup here, then we're going to see the revenue available for the likes of England and New Zealand will be that much greater. The TV contracts will be that much greater, but we've got to invest in the short term in getting it out there, growing the reach before we grow the revenues.
Yep.
We've got to get people watching the game, seeing these great stars, seeing those images we talked about from Rugby World Cup. Mm-hmm. They were very nearly not put up on North American screens, right? So that's important.
So talking about the game itself, the spectacle, the entertainment package that it is, we saw the TMO and all the controversy around that at the Rugby World Cup. What are your thoughts around that? Have they got it right? Does it need tweaking?
It's very expensive to do it because I know because we run domestic test matches, and to have three TMOs, which is basically what you had in a World Cup game, right? You had the TMO for the match, and then you had the bunker, which had 2 more TMOs. So you got to fly all those people in or get them on TVs. But I actually think they're closer to getting it right than they have been. Mm-hmm. I know there's a lot of people with your accent maybe don't agree with it, but I think one of the big issues was that the communication of the bunker system. as a commentator, I had time with the referees and we had it explained to us how it was going to work. So when I saw those two incidents in the final, for example, the South Africa-New Zealand final, it was clear as day to me that one was a red and one was a yellow. Absolutely no doubt, given the information that I've been able to absorb over the previous 6 weeks. I don't think the public had all that information. And, commentators were over there with some sort of older views. I like the idea that the poor old referee who's right in the middle doesn't have to make an on-the-spot decision about basically the future of the World Cup final or the next 60 minutes of a World Cup final. That's not fair on the individual, and it's never going to end well. So I think that side of it, that they had the confidence to refer, was important. So I think it's partly about communicating. I think when you have 26, or for the World Cup final, you had 39 cameras, it's a lot easier to do. When you're playing your provincial match or your club match, it's a very different situation. So that's still a debate to be had, how we're going to do the same thing. We want people to play the game. We want people to be governed for acts that are unsafe or that aren't appropriate. But we also want people to stay in the game and involve, and enjoy the game. If someone slips up and hits someone in the chin with a shoulder, that's bad. But we're sort of starting to see maybe that just by banning those people from the game, we're not going to change it, right? It was happening throughout a World Cup where nobody wanted to be sent off. Not one of those great players, including the New Zealand captain, wanted to be sent off. It's the last thing he wanted. But there are some things that we have to have a frank discussion about. It's funny, if you turn on rugby league thing, you're like, wow, these guys aren't having any discussions about these headshots, right? Like, it's just state of origin last year. I mean, there could have been 10 referrals in the first 10 minutes. I mean, it's quite amazing. So I'm glad that rugby's having the discussion. I think there were some big strides made at the World Cup. Is it perfect? No. And I think one thing that I love about when I watch the NFL gridiron and that it is clear where the lines of delineation are, what they're looking for in a replay. I don't think a lot of our public often always know that.
Yep.
What the law is and what the referee is looking for. What is something like mitigating? If a shoulder hits a chin, what mitigates that and what maybe makes that okay for one guy and not for the other guy? Yep. I don't think that conversation was had.
Just for the record, I'm in favour of the TMO, and but like you, I think there's an education and a communication process around it that needs to go out. Another thing that I think that was obvious during the Rugby World Cup is we had an audience that came along to view the Rugby World Cup for the first time, perhaps, when it comes to rugby viewing. And with the law changes happening during the period and the cycle before the Rugby World Cup, as you just alluded to, those people probably weren't up to speed in understanding what the recent laws are. And I think there just needs to be given more time to really to iron all the bugs out, like any new system that comes in, right? If at the end of the day it's going to save one life, right? Then it's done its job, right?
Yeah, I one of my passions is commentating, and I get to do it on some great games, and just did my first World Cup as a host broadcaster. And the job there is really to talk to some hardcore people about what you're seeing, but also to introduce new people as to what the discussion is, what people are trying to do. And it's something I'm passionate about, partly because I come from this market, North America, where you have to do that. No point in calling a game at a super high level if 90% of your audience has never seen the game before.
Exactly.
So that's a big piece of it, and I think the good commentators can really help that as well.
Yep.
And working in conjunction, you see it in NFL. They work in conjunction with the referees. We see it on the 7 Series, right? Yep. We're talking to those guys all the time about the different interpretations, and then we can pass them on to the viewer at home.
Yeah, cool. In terms of the future for Canada Rugby in the short term, we've talked a lot about it today, but are there a couple of key points that you want to throw out to my audience that's saying, hey, well, this is what we're really going to focus on in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think it's being as good as we can be, to put it like simply. But we have fixtures now that we can work back from and focus, so we can build plans, we can build development tours, and we can start to invest in our players again. Basically, we've been doing that for the last year and a half. It's a hard sell, though, because a lot of the pro clubs don't want to release their players. Sometimes the players don't want to be released, and I've been in that situation. Mm-hmm. So that's not always a black and white situation. Our coaching is excellent. Kingsley Jones is a good coach. Mm-hmm. He just doesn't have any time with the players. So on the men's side, we need that. On the women's side, we need investment. Mm-hmm. We can make some real differences. We have a core of players who are hungry, but these women want to stay in the game. They want to train in Canada if they can. but then they also want to dedicate themselves for at least a year out from a World Cup. So that's what one of the goals is to try and get the resources in place to support the women's 15s team as they go. Okay. And on the sevens front, we had a great weekend in Cape Town. The men in particular just stepped up, smashed New Zealand out of the gate, smashed Samoa, which is great to see. So a group that's finding its way under head coach Sean White, an alum who's working really hard. That was really important because obviously for the men's group, Olympic qualification is still on the table in June for repechages. For the women, they're already qualified, so they're just trying to work through some combinations. Coach Jack Hanratty there, working hard, and it's exciting time as though that circuit comes to Vancouver, and it's the Olympics looming at the end of the summer. So these are huge moments for our athletes. We just need to give them the best support we can, and I'm pretty excited that. The dollars we do have, we're going to be spending well. And we may not have as many as we want, but we're going to try and get more, and we're going to try and spend them really well, and allow our athletes to get better.
Brilliant. Anything in the pipeline to get an All Black team or a Springbok team to come up to Canada to play a game?
Not at the moment. It's been, I tell you what, some of our most successful results have been New Zealand Māori. That's been a great fixture. People love seeing them. Yep. Obviously, we'll have the Blitzbach and the New Zealand Sevens up to Vancouver. Yep. But no, I do know there's chats. There's always been chats about North America because both those countries want to play in North America. Yeah, well, we will see. We'd love to have Tier 1 nations in Canada. We're in some discussions right now. There've been some leaks around that we hopefully will have something this summer, which will be a great test for our men's 15s athletes. And for the women, they're pretty fortunate. They're playing the top teams in the world all the time through WXV and Pac-4. So that's great to see.
Fantastic. Okay, one last thing before I say goodbye to you today, Gareth. Eddie Jones has just announced he's off to Japan. What are your thoughts?
Not surprised. I know Eddie pretty well. I love Eddie. I know he loves to annoy people, and he does it very well. Yeah, no, I'm not surprised.
But he wasn't going. He wasn't going. No, he wasn't talking to them. No.
Yeah, of course. No, he's got an incredible thick skin. I know him as a rugby guy from way back, and from just seeing him. I've seen him in Japan previously in different environments. Spent some time in London with him, and that's the one thing I did laugh about. Obviously people love to hate Eddie, but I'm like, if you sit in the pub with him and have a pint with him, he's just a rugby guy. Yeah. And he happens to wind people up, but I guess he's earned that right, has he?
He has. He's earned that right. Absolutely. Yeah.
No, hey, rugby needs more Eddie Joneses. Australia may not think that right now, but I really think we do. We need people who speak their minds and who genuinely love the game, and he does that.
Yeah.
There's no question about that one.
Fantastic. Well, listen, it's been an absolute great pleasure of mine to have you on the show today. And I want to thank you really for giving us a great overview about rugby in Canada. I've learnt a lot about the game in your country, and I'm sure all the listeners and viewers have as well. So anytime you want to come back and talk some rugby on my show, I'd love to have you.
Well, great. I appreciate it, and well done on creating the dialogue. Anyone who likes what they're hearing and wants to get involved and support our athletes, give me a call.
Are you happy for me to put your contact details in the video description? Yeah?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, have a Merry Christmas and holiday season, and hope to get to speak to you again soon, Gareth.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate the work you're doing.
Okay, bye for now. So there we go. That was Gareth Rees talking to me from beautiful Vancouver in Canada today, and I hope you enjoyed that show because it was really interesting. Well, I was really interested to hear a lot about what's going on in rugby in Canada, how they've got this strategic plan they've put together, and how that's going to be the framework and structure for them to go ahead successfully, not only in the men's 15 game, but across the rugby community in general across Canada, and some unique challenges that they face from a climatical point of view, but also from a geographical point of view. A very interesting conversation. So let me know what you think in the comments about this chat. If you've got any questions in particular for Gareth, drop those in the comments as well. I'll make sure I pass them on, or we'll get them back on the show and have another chat in the not too distant future. Well, thanks very much for listening to us on Inside Rugby with Mark today. Appreciate you being around. If you do like my content, hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with all your rugby friends across the world, because we want to keep growing this community. I'm going to be back again really soon with some more content right here on Inside Rugby. Until then, stay safe, stay well, and it's time to say adios from Mexico.